Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bella, I'm a seamstress and I want to teach you how to sew. Today is the second installment of me making my fall wardrobe. I really don't know where this video is going. I have no idea what I want to make. Don't know what kind of mood I'm in. Don't know what kind of piece I need. But I think I'm going to start by going through my fabrics and then going through Pinterest, gathering up some inspiration, and then we'll reconvene and get a plan going. So I went through my Lutterloh pattern kit. If you want to know more about this, I talked about it a little bit more in depth in my fall sewing inspo video that I did a few videos ago, and I just focused on patterns in this kit, so if you want to take a deeper look into it, you can see that video. I'll link it down below. So I am looking at this pattern that is not at all the way that I want it to look in the final result, but I really like the square neckline bodice of this dress, and so I'm gonna just take that portion. I've used this pattern before and had to make a few little adjustments, so I'm really hoping that this works. I have this piece of black velvet. It's like that kind of really low pile velvet that's almost like suede, but it's not suede. You can't see the detail at all because it's black, but I think that this would be a really nice detailed piece to have be the center panels, and then maybe use just a plain black crepe for the sides and the back. So I'm going to start kind of mapping out this pattern and see how much fabric I have to work with. I also am not sure exactly how I want to do the closures for this top. I think I'm just going to kind of cut my fabric out and start sewing and then get to that part later. Closures are always an afterthought for me, so I might just throw a zipper in the back of this. One piece of sewing supplies that I don't hear people talk about very often, but is so necessary when you need it, is a lint roller. When you're working with fabrics like this, especially when they're in a dark color, they just pick up so much dust, and if you have a designated space that you sew in, you know how dusty it gets. When you're cutting fabric, all that fiber is just exploding into the air, and it can be really annoying when you're working with a dark color that you can really see everything on. So I'm just rolling this piece of fabric out. I've ironed it. Now I'm gonna clean it off so that I can start cutting my pattern from it. So this is kind of what it's looking like right now. It's hanging down quite a bit in the center because there's darts that need to be sewn in place. So now I need to pick my other fabric to go on the rest of the top that isn't velvet. So this is going to be the sides and the back. It's also going to meet the velvet up here at the top. And I also need to get a fabric to do the lining with. Oh my gosh, I wonder if I have any black lace, because then I could do a little lace detail on the armholes. See, this is how the sewing process goes. I don't know what I'm making until I'm done. It's very rare that I have an idea in mind and it just turns out the way that I thought it was going to turn out. I kind of just keep adding things as I go along. I'm going to look for laces right now because that sounds more fun than looking for a lining fabric. I'm looking at this cotton trim here, and I think that could be really cute. Like just a little kind of cap. And what I also found that I have is some hook and eyes by the meter. So I'm also going to keep these out just in case I want to do a front closure with them when it's done. Because I don't know if I have a zipper that's the right length for this, and I don't ever want to go to the fabric store just to get a zipper. So we might just be doing hook and eyes. Okay, so I have all of my pieces cut out right now. Outer shell front, outer shell back, and I have lining front and lining back. And I have all of the darts and seams pinned down for at least the outer layer right now. I'm only gonna do that for the outer layer because I don't wanna waste the time of pinning everything in place in the lining if it's not exactly right on the outside. So I'm gonna stitch all this down first and then try it on and make sure I like the fit, and probably try to decide a direction I'm gonna go in with the closure because that might impact how I attach the lining. So I'm just gonna sew these now and then kind of check back in and see how it's looking. A little trick that I use when I'm ironing curves is I lay the right side down on the ironing board and then I put the curve kind of along the corner of the curve of the ironing board. So the seam is running along the curve of the end of the board here, and then you can easily just press it down. Still go slowly and be careful, but it just helps to get that curve to lie kind of flat. So we have the outer layer of this top completely done. All the darts are in place, and now I just need to sew the two layers together. I left quite a bit of extra room in the back panel, so I think that's going to give me the flexibility of being able to try it on without deciding on a closure yet. Let me just think here. I think the hook and eyes are going to be really cute for this, so I'm gonna go with hook and eye, I think, right? Because like it's like a corset vibe. I feel like you need hook and eyes, so that means that I just need to try this on and then cut into the front panel, which is gonna be the scariest part, because that's when you just like pray that the hook and eyes are gonna go well so that you don't mess up your whole project. Because I feel like if you mess up the back closure, it's not as important. Like if I didn't exactly put a zipper in very well, I can just wear something over it. It really doesn't matter. But if it's the front, that's like the whole point of the top. So let's hope that this works. I'm gonna sew these together now and then try it on, see how it fits, see how much I need to take in on the back panel. How much to take out of the back panel? Do I cut the front panel first, or do I take out the back panel first? Cut the back panel down the center. I can take that measurement and take it out from the lining piece, and I need to put the darts in the lining piece first. And then how much space are the hook and eye is going to take up, so should I do those first? Oh my god. I swear most of the time spent on a sewing project, especially if you're kind of making it up as you go along like I do, is figuring out which steps you have to do before or after other steps. Because there's such an order to things when you're sewing. Because it's almost like if you really want to be conscious of your finishes and how things are going to look, and especially if you're lining something, like you kind of have to keep in mind your final steps for the entire project. I had to take my makeup off because it was making me claustrophobic. I literally couldn't even think about this because I was like, I can't breathe in this makeup. And I also realized that this is going to take me a lot longer than I thought, so I won't be able to film the final results today anyways, so I just surrendered the look. The one thing that I'm struggling with is figuring out how I can stitch close enough to the hook and eyes without having my needle go over them, because there is metal stitched down underneath the fabric of the notion. So like if I want it to be a really close edge, I think I'm just gonna hand stitch it, because I just don't want to be dealing with breaking needles and just having it be really finicky when I'm sewing. So I'm gonna try to find a needle in this abyss of pins. Oh, there we go, got it. So I'm gonna try to keep in mind as much as I can where the line of stitching is on the notion, and then just kind of start stitching it down, and I'm back stitching as I go. My thread is tangled in my headphones. Why do I do this? Okay, it is a brand new day. Last night I was working on stitching the hook and eyes on by hand, which took me 3 hours because I wanted to be very meticulous about it because I do want it to be quite snug fitting. So I realized that those stitches would probably be pulling a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure that it would be very secure. And you know what? You can make hand stitching so secure. So I really tightly and meticulously backstitched basically the whole thing. So let me give you an update. So this is how the eye portion of the hook and eyes attached. I just sandwiched it directly in between the lining and the outer shell and then stitched it down. So I'll show you what the hand stitching portion looks like. So I did backstitch this whole thing and then I just doubled back the entire way, just regular stitching. And then the hook portion, I hope this is gonna make sense. From the outside, this is what it looks like. So I basically had to set the stitching in with the lining. So I took about a centimeter, maybe just less than a centimeter off of the lining fabric to stitch it on so that these two dart seams would line up. I'm not sure if that made any sense, but I'm very glad that I took a lot of time to do that stitching because otherwise I don't think it would have lined up very nicely. I just need to say something about hand stitching. The amount of control that you have when you're stitching by hand is wild. Those 3 lines of stitching would have taken me maybe a total of like 5 to 10 minutes, counting like pinning and adjusting everything in place. It took me 3 hours comparatively to sew them by hand, but I just feel like it gives me the peace of mind of knowing that like this is gonna look a lot better than if it was machine stitched, just because of the amount of control that you can have. You really, like, every millimeter is controllable when you're stitching by hand. So if there's something that you're doing in a project and you're unsure of if the machine will really like give you the result you want, or in this case, like if it's something that you don't want your needle to go over but you still need to stitch it down, and you think that hand stitching is going to be like a cop-out and not look as good, trust me, just do the hand stitching. You will be so happy with yourself. And there's so many techniques that you can use for it, and you can really like develop your own style kind of. I absolutely love it. I feel so happy when I'm stitching something by hand. It just makes me feel so much more connected to the garment, and I can't recommend it enough. It does take way longer to do, but in my opinion, in some cases, it's totally worth it. Okay, let's talk about next steps. So essentially now our front panels have part of the lining and the outer shell sewn together. Just this part where the hook and eyes are gonna go. So I'm attaching all of the shoulder seams together. So there's 4 in total because there's the 2 for the outer layer and then 2 for the lining. So I'm gonna stitch those together now. This is definitely the kind of project where like I'm trying so hard to think ahead of every step and I just can't. So I'm gonna sew those now. And hopefully that was the right choice, because then I think what I can do is just sew the side seams and then the neck, I think. I'm so happy that this is working because I'm just blindly pinning things, and I'm pinning the right things. At one point, I just thought that everything was completely twisted, and I twisted it and then sewed it, so then I was gonna have to take everything out again, but no. So now I have all of my side seams pinned. So again, we're just working with this big tube. I know this doesn't help you, but I never said this was a tutorial. So I'm gonna sew these down now and then sew the neck. And then I get to put the little frill on the shoulders. There is nothing more satisfying to me than just like looking at all of these seams. That's just perfection. And my favorite thing about lining something, like completely lining it, no way to get in the lining, is that you don't have to finish your seams. You just iron them and then they're fine, tucked away in their little lining. So I'm gonna do just that now. I'm gonna iron down all of the shoulder seams and all of the side seams, and then we can get to like putting the finishes on this top, which is, I think, gonna be the most fun part. I'm gonna take my tailor's chalk right now. They're just these triangles. They're like flat triangles of chalk, and they make it really easy to draw lines on your fabric. So I'm gonna use this on the part where the hook and eyes go in, because I want that to be a little bit more curved, I'm thinking. And I just wanna make sure that when I stitch that down, that the hook and eyes are gonna line up exactly perfectly. I'm just gonna mark a slight curve kind of going along like that, just so that I'm not too straight across on the front. Is that gonna look good? Yeah. Day 4 of working on this top. I had to do some work off camera because I was having trouble with my memory card, so please excuse that. But to be fair, I don't think I could have explained this very well anyways, because I was kind of just figuring out what I needed to do as I went along, and then spent a lot of hours hand stitching this. So where we're at right now with this top is I have these little shoulder details done. So I put these in between the top layer and the lining while they were right sides together, and then what I did was just kind of curved the finish in so that it has this nice effect where it tapers in right here. So I did that on both sides of it. I marked the middle point, lined it up with the shoulder seam, and then stitched it all in place. So I've left myself quite a lot of fabric in the back panel. So I'm gonna try this on right now, and then with pins, I'm gonna start taking it in, see how much excess fabric I have, and finalize the fit. So now is the part where I undo this and lay it down on the table and see how absolutely horrible my pinning looks. Well, that was sad. I just broke my chalk. The very last thing that I need to do is finish the bottom of this. Sometimes with a top like this, where first of all, I don't want to take too much off the bottom. So I don't want this to really end up being cropped. I want it to stay at my true waistline. Secondly, there's 2 layers to this top, and one of them is velvet, so that means it's pretty thick. And then add on all of the seams that are in here. So imagine that we were gonna hem this the way that I normally would, where I turn it over twice. Just looking at where the seam meets in the back. So you can see here that this is the middle seam, and it's actually sitting right where 2 other seams on the outside meet. So this spot in particular, we have 1, 2 layers of fabric from the original seam, 3, 4 from where the middle seam meets, and then multiply that by 2 because we have the lining piece. So put that together, that's 8 layers of fabric just in this little spot here. And then we turn it over, so that's doubling it. That's now 16 layers of fabric. And then we turn it over again and add another 8 layers of fabric onto that. That's now 24 layers of fabric. There's no way that this hem is going to work that way. Similarly to how you would apply a facing, if you're familiar with that. But if you're not, then I'm just gonna walk you through this in terms of a hem. So what I'm going to be using for this is just this plain black, kind of gross grain ribbon. This one is cotton just because it's the only black ribbon that I have on hand right now, but a really pretty way to do this is with a satin ribbon. It just adds such a beautiful accent, or a velvet ribbon would be really nice too, but we're going with cotton today because that's what I have. So measure out a piece of ribbon that is the length of the whole bottom of whatever you're hemming. I'm gonna give myself an extra little bit, like a few centimeters to work with, just so that I have enough to make sure that I can finish the edges in a really clean way. Make sure it's all laying completely flat, especially if it's something that you've lined, because you wanna make sure that both bottoms are totally lined up. So if you need to trim this just to make sure that it's sitting properly, do that now, and then make sure that all of this surface area is laying as flat as you can possibly get it. Start pinning this ribbon just like this. So lining up the edge of your ribbon with the edge of your shirt. I'm gonna leave about 2 centimeters on the end here, just so that we can tuck that in when we're done. I'm on the inside of the shirt now, and I'm just turning this ribbon up and pinning it in place so that I have a nice clean line to stitch this down by hand with.